Students, I hope you guys are having a great week, and I hope these lessons are finding you well and are helpful to you understanding factors and multiples. Today we are going to be on our what's actually our third day of factors and multiples, but our second in this lesson series. And we're just going to look a little bit more and kind of extend our knowledge from the last lesson to help us understand how rectangles and factors can make sense, how they help you understand each other, or both of those things. So, our learning target today, if you can see it, read it with me. If not, totally okay, you can listen. Today we are learning how rectangles are related to factors, which seems kind of silly because you're thinking, well, rectangles, like, what is that? That's a shape. What does that have to do with factors? You will see soon enough. How will you know if this is making sense? How will you know if you're understanding? Because one thing that's huge and really important in being a mathematician is being able to know, hey, what I'm doing is making sense. I'm doing the correct thing. We will know we have learned it when I can use rectangles to identify all prime and composite numbers between 1 and 36. So, the tricky thing about that specific learning target is it's got 2 new vocabulary words in it. So, before we get on with the lesson, we need to go over our vocabulary. There will be some vocabulary that we used in the previous lesson. We've got factors, numbers you use to multiply to make another number. And then we will also still be using factor pair, which is 2 numbers you multiply to make a product. Those will be continued to be used throughout our lesson. A couple new words that might not be new to us, but specific for this lesson we want to remember is the word product. A product is an answer to a multiplication problem. And rectangle, which feels kind of funny because I'm sure many of you are like, I know what a rectangle is, but could you put it into words? So a rectangle is a sided figure with one side longer than the other. So we will put these all right here. Now, for today, our most important vocabulary words are going to be prime and composite. Now, the reason that these are important is because they're kind of interesting English words that we don't use a lot in math, but are important to understand. So prime, or principal, as it's in Spanish, is a whole number with exactly 2 factors. Exactly means it doesn't have any more factors than that, but it also doesn't have any fewer factors than that. A prime number is a number that has exactly that many factors. So for example, you worked with some numbers last week trying to find with rectangles. Some numbers, the only factors they have are 1 and themselves, but every number at least has 1 in itself. So it's important to understand that if it's only 1 in itself, for example, the number 3 is a prime number. The other word is composite. Compuesto, you guys know I'm practicing that Spanish, whole numbers with more than 2 factors. Whole numbers with more than 2 factors. So those are going to be important today, that as we are working with rectangles and understanding those, these are going to be important for us to understand what a prime number is and what a composite number is. That's essentially what you're going to be asked to figure out by the end of today. As we are working today, our habit is answers are important, but they are not the math. I was so happy to see some of your productive struggle yesterday, or I guess it'd be last week, as some of you, the answers weren't perfect, but I could see your thinking. sometimes the ability to see your thinking is just as important as getting the correct answer. So before I show you what your lesson or what your assignment is going to look like today, I'm going to kind of explain a little bit to you. I don't know if we'll be able to see that, so I'm just going to put it in here for now. Kind of explain to you how rectangles can help you understand factors and therefore help you understand prime and composite numbers. A rectangle is a shape, a four-sided shape with one side longer than the other. This is an example of a rectangle. It's not a super obvious rectangle. Oftentimes when we think of rectangles, we think of super long on one side, super short on the other, which yes, that is a rectangle, but anything where one side is shorter than the other is considered, in this case, a rectangle. So a rectangle has something called dimensions. If you're at home, say that with me, dimensions. Dimensions of a rectangle are the length and the width of the rectangle. So the dimensions of a rectangle are the width, which for this one happens to be 1, 2, 3, and the length, which for this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What we learned earlier in our lessons last week is that the amount of squares on each side are also factors. So that is telling us that the length and the width of a rectangle are the factors of that area, of that number. And from what we remember from last week, we know that 5 times 3, you multiply your squares to get the total idea. And for this, it's the length of 5 times the width of 3 to give us our area. And area is a word we'll get to, don't you worry, of 15. Now, we can know 15 is not a prime, 15 is a composite number because it has more than 2 factors. I will be honest, guys, this is kind of tricky for me to explain and show you when I'm not with you, but do the best you can on this assignment. Please email me or message me if you're confused on something. Just do your very best. That's all I ask. Thanks so much, guys. I'm going to switch to my other screen to explain your assignment to you. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So just quickly wanted to explain your assignment just for some extra help here. There are 6 pages to this assignment. Each one has an activity, and on any ones you feel comfortable, I would love to see you use the microphone. Oh, of course it went away now, but use the microphone to explain your thinking. Show how many different rectangles you can make with an area of 14. Second page says, in your own words, tell me how to define factor and how they relate to factors and how they relate to the rectangles you drew for the number 14. Write your answers here. I gave you some sentence stems. Number 3, which whole numbers from 1 to 36 have only one possible rectangle? So you may need to do some work on Seesaw or some different things to practice and try and kind of figure out, or just figuring out with your factors, why do they only have one rectangle? Which numbers from 1 through 36 have the greatest number of rectangles? Which number has more factors, 48 or 56? Justify your work with words and diagrams. Once again, if you would like to use the microphone, that is totally okay. And last but not least, your journal. Thank you, guys. Work hard. Once again, if you need any help, please let me know.